Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our October 20th, 2022 regular meeting of the Marysville Board of Education. We previously called the meeting to order, had an executive session, so right now, if you'll all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd appreciate it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First up, I would accept a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Smith and second by Ms. Savage. Roll call, please.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson? Yes. Mr. Keck?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. And tonight, at this time, we'd like to recognize some special students. So we'll ask you to please come up to the stage when your name is called, and we'll have a picture taken once everyone is up here.
All right, I think Mr. Langhouse, are you handing them their certificates? All right, so tonight it's our privilege to recognize several students who have scored at the top of their PSAT rankings. So first we have Will Mason. Will is a National Merit Scholarship semifinalist, which indicates he's in the top 0.5% of scores in the state. Do you want to walk on it? Do you guys want to shake his hand maybe? We'll do it that way. How's that? And I think we can clap now. We kind of interrupted that clap. And then we have 3 National Merit Scholar Commended students, which means they were in the top 3 to 4% of scores in the state for the PSAT. So Aiden Marbaugh, Will Roush, and Andrew Watkins. Congratulations. There's one additional category. It's called National Rural and Small Town Awards for Outstanding Performance on the PSAT. And that is a combo score of a GPA and the top 10% of PSAT. So some of the students who could not be here tonight, Preston Herring, then Aiden once again, and then Michael Dizon, not here. But congratulations to them, and do you want to take Aiden his? So really, when you're talking about these students, it's really the top of the top when it comes to the PSAT, and that's a really high mark, and we're super proud of those accomplishments. We will take a picture. Do one of you guys mind? I think Jonathan's going to come. If you guys don't mind lining up with the board. Can't open. Oh no, I haven't logged in yet. Congratulations, well done. Well done, good job.
Great work by all those students. Make us proud to be Monarchs, right?
That's right.
All right, now we would also like to recognize our Employee of the Month, Mr. Michael Covert Jr. Is there a motion to approve Mr. Covert as our Employee of the Month?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Keck.
Second.
Second by Ms. Savage. And now I think Diane has a few words to say about him. As he makes his way up to the stage,
I
yeah.
always make you stand up here, so we can really embarrass you. So Mike is custodian right here at BMS, right? So I have the privilege to read the submissions about you and what your peers have to say about your work. So you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Mike is superb at his job. He truly cares about his duties and recognizes his part in making BMS the best it can be for our students. He cares about how our building and grounds are presented to the public and wants it to shine for all who enter. Plus, Mike is a friendly guy. He always has a smile on his face and something encouraging to say. Congratulations, Mike. Good for you.
And now can I have a roll call so we make it truly official?
Mr. Keck?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson? Yes. Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. And once again, thank you so much. Mr. Clark. Right, do we have any public participation tonight that we know of? Let's see, Mr. Langhouse, oh, yep, you're going to check on that, thank you. None, okay. Then we are ready to move on to our presentations. Our first presentation tonight is from Naven Elementary, Ms. Lewis. And Ms. Mulaney.
Hello, good evening.
Hi there.
Thanks for having me, and I would like to take a few minutes to share Naven's building goals for this school year. So in June, at our admin retreat, we had the opportunity to review our building data over a multitude of areas. And from that review, we created some building goals under those 4 umbrellas you see above: future readiness, language arts, mathematics, and wellness. The first part was easy. It wasn't easy, but we did it in August, so I guess we got it accomplished quickly. And that was to develop a building vision that represented what we hoped and dreamt our kids at Naven would have with them when they left us at the end of their time with us. And so we did it as a staff. We wanted everybody to participate and have a hand in developing what we believed would be a vision for our building and our students. I won't read it to you because it's up there and on your screens. But we wanted to make sure if we did this vision that we kept it alive and that we were committed to it. So in turn, we asked our grade level teams and our departments to also look at our data and to develop goals under those same 4 umbrellas that they could apply and work on in their classrooms or in their departments. And that's what they're working on right now. They have their goals set. They're implementing them in their classrooms. And the ultimate goal is that it's going to help us to reach our building goals by the end of the school year. And so that way we keep that vision at the forefront and alive in our building. The second part of our future readiness was just to get our families and our parents involved in our buildings. We want community back in our buildings, community members. We want our students to have experiences with different people and different places in our community. And we want our parents to feel involved and to know what we're doing, understand what's happening in our building, and to feel a part of it. And so basically we asked our staff to commit to doing 3 things, either volunteering or developing projects in a multitude of areas that would also involve our parents and families and our community members. A couple of examples are we're doing a school multicultural fair. We're actually calling it Holidays Around the World. And all of our staff and all of our students participate, and many, many of our families do. And hopefully some community members will come. Another thing we have in progress is we want to have a series of career talks where we invite parents in and also community members to talk about their careers and job choices. We did a survey with our kids. We found out things they were interested in, but interestingly enough, we found out that there were a lot of jobs and careers that they really didn't know that much about. So this gives us an opportunity to plan that carefully so that they get a really robust experience. The next goal is language arts. Our goal is that we will engage in foundational reading strategies and language comprehension strategies, incorporating close reading. We know if kids have good phonics skills and foundations and can decode and encode, and they also have robust comprehension strategies that they can use to understand text, that you create a great reader. So we looked at our data, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. And with our iReady data this year with reading, we noticed that we have way too many kids that are at least 1 grade level or 2 or more behind. And in 2019, we had over 50+% at grade level or mid-grade level. This year we have 30%, and we've seen it decrease a little bit over COVID and some of those things. So we also know that having those reading foundational skills, when we send our kids to intervention with our reading experts, they learn that explicit phonics instruction, and it really helps move them along in their growth in reading. So we said to ourselves, and I will give credit to my instructional coach, Shelby Mullaney, we decided we were going to take some of those strategies and skills that kids get in intervention, push into our classrooms, and teach that 4 or 5 times a week. And we've done that for the last 6 weeks or so. And I'm talking grades 1 through 4 almost every day. And so there were 2 benefits from this. First of all, and this is yet to be determined, we are hoping that some of our kids we've identified to be at risk that could be heading for reading intervention this month will greatly decrease because they've been exposed to all this robust instruction in phonics in the classroom as a Tier 1 intervention. That's one benefit. And we're starting our post-testing right now, so we will stay tuned for that. We hope we have positive results. The second benefit was we were able to provide professional development for our teachers on the spot, live, where they could observe the experts teaching their kids, learn the strategies, and turn around the next day and implement them in small reading groups or in classroom instruction. So now they are taking on and learning that they can apply those phonics strategies every day in classroom instruction from this point on. So we're hoping that that's a real benefit for our kids and their reading growth. This is our iReady data that I talked about. You can see there's way too many kids, in my opinion, in yellow and red. We want to move those kids forward, hopefully by providing that the phonics instruction and also the close reading comprehension instruction in the classroom. We have PD set for some of our close reading strategies, so our teachers are really learning best practice in that too. Hopefully we have much less yellow and much less red throughout the year, but especially at the beginning of next year. This is our KRA language and literacy data. And if you see in 2020, we were looking pretty good. By 2021, our area of need had increased quite a bit. And this year we have, I think it's 57.5% of students that would be considered off track by the KRA. And that is directly attached to that early literacy part of our report card. So we do have some interventions and supports in place to face that challenge, and we are hoping for some good results and movement in our students. The second part of our language arts was just to embed writing instruction within our content areas, that is science and social studies. What we were seeing at Naven was we were teaching writing in an isolation. Some of the kids just were not engaged in what they were learning. They didn't see the purpose necessarily, no matter what situations we set up. So in the content areas of science and social studies, those are pretty interesting. The kids do a lot of projects and project-based learning. They are involved and engaged, and we are hoping by that engagement, we can incorporate that writing instruction and give them some authentic reasons to write, so that they see writing as a tool that they're going to use for the rest of their lives. Also, they'll be developing vocabulary that we hope we can reinforce in that writing about science and social studies. So that's in progress, and we're helping our teachers develop lessons and units. They've already had some PD in it, so that we're going to see how that goes for the rest of this year, but we're hoping it increases as the year goes on. Math was our next umbrella, and same thing you'll see with our iReady math data. We have too many kids in yellow, too many kids in red that are not starting at grade level at the beginning of the school year, which means we have to do a lot of makeup to get them where they need to be. And we're, instead of taking them from grade level and really growing them, for some kids we're going back and we're bringing them along with us. So anyway, we decided we wanted to make sure we had consistent, aligned math instruction that included really some high quality pieces and parts. So we, as a staff, we agreed that we would commit to having number talks, which works on mental math and some of those skills that are more mental in I don't even know how to say that. More mental, more number strategies, that kind of thing. Then we would do a mini lesson based on the standards. Kids would have centers where they have differentiated activities based on their needs and based on their abilities. Part of that rotation would be a daily small group with teachers, like a guided math group, based, again, where they are and how we would grow them. Kids call it teacher time sometimes. And then they would be involved in some rich math problem-solving tasks. We're working, all that is in place at this point. We're working on finding really good resources for teachers that align with our standards and are robust for the math number problem-solving tasks. So we're in progress. We want that continuity. We're also working to align all of our math instruction with the iReady toolbox that has lessons, resources, centers, assessments. Hopefully we can align that with what our standards are and use the same vocabulary, the same approaches and strategies, K through 4th. And hopefully that will make a difference. That's just a quick picture of, again, our math. Too many kids in the yellow, too many kids at red. And so the last goal is wellness. That's the last umbrella. We have two parts of it, but I'm going to combine them together. We have three things that I guess I would call the stakes in our tent, so to speak. One is our habits of mind. The second thing is new to our building this year, and that is our building values that we are instilling now in the classrooms and in our school. And the third thing are PAC strategies that help us with positive behavior, because the less behavior issues you have, the more instructional time is available. And those PAC strategies are really helpful for use in the classroom, and our students really relate to those. So we want to take those three areas and really embed them every day in instruction for our kids. They know about them. I'm not sure they have used them in the past to their fullest ability or extent, and so that is something we have committed to, is to revisiting each and all and reteaching those and making sure that they are part of our students' day every day at NAVEN. And there's just a couple pictures of the Sunshine, is a classroom that did class values. The tree will represent our building values, and kids will earn leaves based on how they treat others, and if they can live those values. And then we have our NAVEN notes. You can see the last poster, Inspire. You know, we need to purposefully teach about people in history or current people that have inspired people or have collaborated with others to invent something or have thought outside the box. I think the more the kids know who those are and what those attributes mean, the more that they will want to, accept those for themselves. And again, the second part is just to celebrate all of that. So we want to have more purposeful plans, celebrations at the classroom level and at the building level. And it might be they get NAVEN notes, they get recognized on our NAVEN news broadcast every day. It might be that we have an assembly to honor some of our students, or we have students of the week or month that are in our newsletter so our parents can appreciate some of the things that our kids are accomplishing and their kids are accomplishing. In the classroom, the celebration might be small. It might be that you get to sit at the teacher's desk for the day or wear a hat because you accomplished something, reached a goal, whatever. And when we talk about celebrating kids, we're talking about not just academically, but anything that they set a goal for that they accomplish. It might be soccer. It might be the fact that they saved enough money to buy something that they've wanted. So if they share that with us, we want to celebrate that, because the more we recognize it, the more kids realize how important it is, and you all know what it feels like to accomplish something. And that's just some examples. That's a class tree. When we're at school, we're a family, and we have values. We have values in our classroom as a classroom family. We have values as a building family. The things on the door are called toodles. That's part of PACS, and I love that particular thing because our students gave them to other students. So they recognized their peers for doing something cool, whether it was finishing their work or being kind to someone. They were able to give their friends a toodle. We do teacher to student. We'd like to do more student to student. We certainly have our NAVEN note wall for leadership, and the gumball machines are brand new and they are in progress. But we talked about having an iReady competition between grade levels at first. But our staff talked, and they really felt that it was more important that kids set personal goals, and if they hit their personal goals with iReady, they earned so many gumballs, and they worked together as a team. And when they hit a certain level or reached a certain amount, they would get a big celebration that they would have part of deciding what that would be. So I really love the personalization there. And really, those are three mottos that we live by: all kids, all ways. We believe in personalized learning every day for all kids. Our kids will change the world is our logo that we live by, and we put a piece of that in our vision as well. And there's the best handle, in my opinion, on Twitter, and that is #NavenRocks. And I thank you for your time and your attention, and if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lewis. Questions, board members, or comments?
Yeah, Dan and I had the opportunity to come and visit with you and to see some of the things that were going on in the building. And I noticed in the iReady triangle, all the different factors and so forth, that vocabulary was really an issue.
Correct.
And my memory is that we talked about that a little bit from and the impact of isolation that kids have experienced for the last couple of days. Is my memory correct on that?
I mean, that's part of it, I'm sure. I also feel that, kids are on devices a lot, where you used to be interacting with your parents and siblings and things. I'm not sure they're getting that same stimulation when they're little. So they're coming in maybe a little behind with vocabulary, but we think if we can really structure a lot of our reading and writing through science and social studies, that's where a lot of rich vocabulary comes from. And there are a lot of things in those standards that a lot of our kids haven't experienced, so it gives us the opportunity to develop that connection and knowledge, and along with that comes that vocabulary. So yes, there's a lot of reasons, but certainly what you're talking about is one of them.
Yeah, and as we were going around, I think it was in Naven that we saw a number talk. Where there
could
was
be.
A young man was trying to explain there were 5 numbers. I remember it. He was adding those, it equaled 27. And he was supposed to explain how he put the numbers together to get the answer. And I can remember just being astounded. We had some students that received awards for their intellectual ability. This young man approached this from a direction that I have absolutely, I would have never seen it that way. But his way worked as well as any way I could have come. So I appreciate the work that the teachers are doing, and I know that the number talks are, creative, they're innovative, they allow kids to find, their own way to the right answer. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I want to thank you for being here this evening.
Sure.
A couple things I just wanted to comment on that you didn't read through all your slides, but you hit on a spelling program.
Yep.
And I think that vocabulary and spelling are, we know that we're going to have some gaps coming into this year from the last 2 years. And we've been very upfront about acknowledging that, but we know how to close those gaps. And I want to thank you for introducing the idea of cross-class writing activities, because I think that's a great idea to help inspire kids to use those writing skills in every class. I've said before that every test is a reading test and every test is a writing test. So I think that's great activities that you guys have. And also memorization of math facts. We saw that demonstrated when we were doing our tours, and how important it is for those first addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, how the kids are demonstrating that they know how to do those things in their head to set those base math skills.
And when you're talking about the spelling, it's just another way to align our subjects, because the kids use strategies from those foundational reading skills to encode, and they do word families and patterns, and it's just another way to reinforce all of that together, and we're hoping that's going to make a significant difference. We have a spelling plan for each grade level this year that they've created, so they're implementing.
Excellent. So thank you for that activity, and recognizing that not only Tier 1, but Tier 2 and Tier 3 activities are all being, kind of like stacked on top of each other to make sure that those kids are getting as much one-on-one time with educators as possible.
Thank you.
I had second everything I've heard tonight, but the thing that jumped out at me, I don't remember whose classroom we were in, but they were teaching a vocabulary word, and I can't even remember the word, but I was just astounded that that was being taught in elementary. I don't know if you can.
Was it narrative?
It might have, yeah, it might have been narrative, yes.
I think so, yeah.
And it was just impressive. And I've heard you say the word rich a few times tonight, but that's the feeling you get from the minute you walk in the building until you leave. I mean, it's just a rich experience. I wish the whole community could see that. So.
Well, we appreciate that a lot, because that's exactly what we're trying to present. So thank you.
Thank you for your presentation tonight.
We did.
Survey only gauge interest, or does it look at skills?
So it does not do a skills part. We just wanted to get some information from our students so that we could personalize that. I'm not doing a job fair because I want the kids to have access to 2 or 3 people at a time where they can really listen, really ask questions, really get involved with our visitors. Sometimes I think in a job fair there's a lot going on at once. Not that they don't have their place, but so we really put that survey out to gauge what our kids want to do. 85% of our students in 3rd and 4th grade, and second, 3rd, and 4th grade already know what they want to be. So we're laughing because somebody made the comment that it's the opposite at the high school, you know, when it comes to be real life. So we found a lot of things that they were interested in, but we could tell by their comments there were some areas they did not have any exposure to. And so that's where we're starting, trying to give them exposure and also feed their interests. So we'll see. It's our first time really doing this in this way, so that's how we attacked it to start with.
Thank you. I really, in first grader, wants to be able to different things.
I think YouTube influencer was big, and as the other, I did not include that in one of my lists. I had an other piece, and that's where the fun came in, to see all the other things they were interested in. Some fantastic, for sure.
Thank you, Lynette. I really appreciated how staff-focused your goals are too. You know, like I saw on every page, 100% of staff are going to be a part of this. And, you know, just really working on that family feeling and all the trees, your family trees and stuff. So I love that, and this career awareness. I mean, that's just critical. That was a main kind of change in our district strategic plan this year. So I appreciate your focusing on that.
Thank you.
Always love those building visits. It's just amazing to walk around.
We
and
love it when
see
you
what's
come. Our
happening.
teachers love it. The kids love it.
Yes.
We appreciate that as well. So
Well,
please.
and you added the Alt-K to your building this
We
year.
did. Yes,
So
we did. They're cute as
That kind of
buttons,
brings
that's
a
for
new
sure.
feel, doesn't it?
They are adorable,
Yeah.
and thank you. And I do have a staff that I couldn't ask for a better staff, or 100% of them love kids, or really they shouldn't be there, right? So, and they live it every day, so I am really lucky and grateful for them.
Well, thank you for your leadership and that of your
you.
team, so appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you. And now I'm happy to welcome, let's see where I'm here. Okay, Union County and Marysville Economic Development Director, Eric Phillips. He's here tonight to share some information on the Hardy World Project. As you all know, we have a resolution regarding a CRA, which is a community reinvestment area, on our agenda this evening. So welcome, Mr. Phillips.
There we go. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yep, that's good.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity, and great to see you all this evening. A few of you I saw later last night as well, and appreciate your participation with yesterday's meeting. So thank you so much. Tonight, we do have a presentation as it will come up. So I'd like to go through that. We have a great opportunity. We have a company who is looking to make an investment in our community, and as a result, they're requesting tax incentives as a result of the project. And I really want to take you through this presentation so you understand a little bit better, and I'll also explain exactly what we're requesting of the board this evening. Next slide, please. So we have a company that's looking to construct a speculative building in the 33 Innovation Park. That's the park where the new building is, the Southgate building in the Innovation Way off 33. It's a 200-acre park. They're looking actually to purchase about 10 acres of land from the city and construct a 122,000 square foot facility. They would have 3 multi-tenant spaces, and those 3 multi-tenant spaces are really important to our community. Currently, we have less than a 1% vacancy rate in our industrial market from a building perspective, so we don't have this product. So this is creating new product for us as that we really need to provide space for future users. It's located again on a 9.8 acre site in the 33 Innovation Park. They're planning over a $14 million investment. They're estimating 75 new jobs in the community with a payroll of estimated about $3.75 million. They plan to start construction by year end if everything goes well with the purchase of the property and the tax incentives. I will say at this point we're in a due diligence period with the company. They have announced they want to purchase the property. This is one step. They've done a lot of soil testings, different testings on the property, but this is one of the check boxes they'll check off before they close. Closing of the property will not occur until later this month or early next month. Next slide, please. This is a little bit about Hardy World. Hardy World is actually, that's not 85 Lumber, that's not an existing company, it's 84 Lumber, I apologize for that. But they're actually the property arm of 84 Lumber, and they own different properties throughout the eastern U.S., including properties in Cincinnati. This will be the first project in the Columbus region. Their portfolio includes light industrial, flex, R&D, logistics, manufacturing, and a tech-focused type of building. They also really want to grow their company, as you can see by the next bullet. They have a lot of company values that are important. 84 Lumber has been around for a long time. The owner and the founder, Joe Hardy, is actually 99 years old, and he was in Marysville a few weeks ago. So we actually had a billionaire in Marysville and visited the community and looked at the site as well. They're excited about this opportunity. Next slide, please. This is the 33 Innovation Park. To the right, upper right, that is US 33. And then the site that we're actually looking at purchasing is actually the, I guess, off-shaded gray area. It's right off Innovation Way and Industrial Parkway as well. But it's kind of the shaded area there as well, 9.8 acres. Next slide, please. This is just the conceptual design of some of the buildings that they actually have done before. You can go to the next slide as well. And this shows you the layout of the building. Again, 122,000 square feet. They're planning at least 3 tenant spaces in the building. Next slide. That gives you some background information. So there's a lot of bullets here, but basically the company is requesting a 10-year 75% tax abatement. It only applies to real property. We do not tax personal property, as I know you're fully aware. Abatements that exceed 60% require school board approval. That's why we're here this evening. The incentive policy also recommends a sharing agreement with a 50-50 split between the schools and the city, and I'll talk about that in a little more detail on another slide. It also requires a partnership between the school district, Ohio High Point, and the company. Typically, that's an internship or some type of program with the school district, and a lot of times it's with the STEM school. The annual tax abatement also requires a monitoring fee that will be an economic development investment, and I believe that's $4,000 a year. The company has also agreed to a $100,000 payment to the school district that would be in $10,000 increments over a 10-year period. It results in a company savings of about $1.36 million over that same period. Next slide, please. This kind of gives you some of the tax information, that what is going to be generated. The property is currently generating $250 per year in tax revenue. That's total. That includes the school district, all the different taxing authorities. So that would be $2,500 over the 10-year period. With the tax abatement, 75-25 that we're proposing, the company will actually pay about $48,000 in taxes annually and $485,000 over the 10-year term. And that's pretty a dramatic increase even with the tax abatement. The few bullets below show you the different entities that would receive the taxes on an annual basis. Of course, the Marysville would actually receive the most because it receives the most in property taxes. So that just gives you a breakdown of what would be provided to each entity. The next slide, provide you a little bit more information about the revenue share. We have what we call the Economic Development Incentive Policy that we've put together that recommends that the city and the school share all taxes 50-50 when we have these types of abatements. What triggers that is when you have a payroll over $1 million with a project, it requires some type of tax share, and that's why this is recommended. So I wanted to provide you some more data here. We estimate over the 10-year period with the 75 employees, there'll be an income tax of about $615,000. The estimated school property tax over the same 10 years would be $358,000. The estimated city property tax over 10 years is about $26,000. That's typically for fire, is what that payment is for. It's not a whole lot of money, as you can see. The estimated tax revenue share between the city and the school is $500,000 each. That's basically putting all the property taxes and the income taxes together and splitting it 50-50 to each party. The donation payment that the school has requested and the companies agreed would be an additional $100,000, making the total estimated contribution to the school district of about $600,000. And after the 10-year, year 11 and there beyond, there will be no donation agreement or revenue share. It will actually go back to 100% of taxes. The $600,000, I have to go back to the slide I showed you a little bit earlier. As you can see, currently it would generate about $2,500 over a 10-year period. So a pretty large increase for the school district and the other parties in the community. You can go to the next slide. We also, the company's considering, it's actually likely to go before the Port Authority on 10/31 of this month. We're looking at a capital lease, and basically what that means, and this doesn't impact the school district, this is just more information. If a company goes through our Port Authority that's locally, we do not have a port in Union, Mill Creek's not big enough for a port, but it's a financing agency that we have locally. It allows the company to do a capital lease to the port, and they can save on sales tax. Sales tax is basically, it's a sales tax exemption for building materials. And you might think that might impact the county, but it doesn't, because about 90+% of our building materials actually come from Franklin County. So it really impacts Franklin County more so than it does our county. The next slide, please. Kind of the approval timeline. First reading with the Marysville City Council for the CRA agreement, the donation agreement, and the tax share agreement. First reading was on October 10th. Second reading will be on October 24th, which is next Monday. We're here tonight on 10/20 for you to consider the CRA agreement, the donation agreement, and the tax share agreement. Ohio High Point's board will have to approve it on 10/26. The reason why is when you have a donation payment or some type of payment around the tax system, there was a state law change last year that says that the Ohio High Point needs to receive or should receive an equal rate to what the K-12 school receives. However, the school district, Ohio High Point, has agreed to waive that and allow the entire $100,000 going to the school district. And then on 10/31 would be the Port Authority review and hopefully approval of the capital lease. Go to the next slide, please. This is the final slide. I know there's a lot of details here, and I apologize. Just wanted to explain exactly what the project is. But Hardy World is a great company in a lot of ways. They're doing a lot of development through the Midwest. It's a well-established developer, and they want to build multi-tenant space that we really need. It will be the first project in the Columbus region, as I explained earlier. Only minimal demands on the schools. Minimal traffic will be generated as a result of this project. They do want to do partnerships, and when I say they have 3 tenants. We're going to ask each of those tenants to have some type of internship or some type of partnership with the school district going forward. And then also the speculative developments attract new companies and industries to the area. And you have to think about this. You have 3 smaller tenant spaces. The goal, of course, at some point, if they're 40,000 square feet each, at some point they're going to want a larger building. So you're kind of a feeder for future growth in our community. And that's how you have to look at speculative development or multi-tenant development in the community. That's all I had. That's a lot. And I appreciate your consideration and open to any questions or comments that you may have this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Any questions or comments from board members?
I was just curious, does Hardy World already have the tenants lined up, or is that upcoming activity?
They do not have tenants lined up, although they're working really hard. We've met with a few of them, and they do not have anybody lined up yet.
Okay.
Now, the document, as I read it, is predicated on Hardy World building the building and creating about 75 jobs, and specific to the school, working with us to come to some sort of benefit for our students, an internship or mentoring or something along that line. If in this case or in any case a business fails to reach those numbers, or if even the internship or some benefit to the schools isn't completed, what happens at that point?
So annually, we have what we call the TIRC. That's not the best acronym, but it's called Tax Incentive Review Council. Both Todd and Diane serve on that, so we review tax abatements on an annual basis. Typically, those meetings will happen in the summer to late summer, and we'll review every tax abatement in the community to make certain they've met the benchmarks that they've actually established. If they do not, then we have a few choices. The TIRC can actually recommend to the legislative authorities that you could either keep the abatement as is based on certain conditions and so forth. You can terminate or you can modify. So you have powers actually to do away with the abatement or modify that. So it is reviewed on an annual basis. I think it's important. It's a great question. This is taxpayer money, and the goal is to protect that taxpayer money. We understand that, and so the company needs to meet the benchmarks that they've actually established. So we check it on an annual basis. This is speculative, so this is a guess. It's going to be 75 jobs, so that's always something you have to worry about. But in the same light, they're taking a leap of faith, investing $15 million in our community. We're taking a leap of faith that they're going to do it and complete it. So,
okay, thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, for being here tonight. In my view, communities thrive when we have strong economic development and good quality education, public schools. And so this is kind of the marriage between those two. I do have a few questions. With the defined partnership with the district, how do we measure if, when it comes to the collaboration with the district and Hardy World? Right now, the language seems to be pretty loose. When you do review, how do we know there is meeting those obligations of having a partnership?
Great question. So after we approve, or hopefully approve all the different things that need to be approved over the next few weeks, and they close on the property, I will do an email and introduce Diane to Taylor Hardy, who's with the company, and really allow Diane and Taylor to have a conversation, maybe a meeting to decide what is best for them. The reason why it's loosely written is that 10 years is a long time, and things change over a 10-year period, so we make it loose, so therefore it's established between the schools and what the schools want and what Hardy World can provide in this, and I think that's key. Now, in this case, it may not be Hardy World opportunities for a partnership is what we'd like to have in the long run, but we would actually make those introductions, and hopefully we establish something, during that time frame. We'll establish something. I just don't know what that will be right now.
It's important to me that we kind of have some teeth to that, because when we do review it, we want to make sure that they're meeting that requirement, and that's a question I have. Will individual tenants be eligible to apply for tax incentives moving forward?
So not a property tax abatement. So we're doing one for this building, and you can't do another tax abatement on an existing building that has a tax abatement. Now, if they were to add on to the building a new construction beyond the 100 that. This only applies, you can't do an abatement on top of an abatement. Now, they could ask for an income tax credit, one of the tenants could, that would go through the city, would not impact the school district.
And say if they ask for an income tax abatement, that would not affect the revenue share split?
That's a great question. We would have to cross that hurdle when it comes, but our incentive policy recommends one or the other, unless it's a very high impact project, and these are smaller spaces. I don't think you're going to have 500 jobs or 300 jobs in one of those 40,000 square foot places, so I doubt there's going to be some type of income tax credit unless it's a major impact company. So Understood. If that's the case, we'd have some dialogue with the schools and discuss what would happen in that case.
And what's the timeline? Right now we have a payroll that's 3.75 million, 75 jobs is the estimate. That's roughly 50K annual salaries for those individuals. Is there a build up to, obviously first year, that's not a requirement for them to meet that? When's that year?
So state law allows a 3-year buildup, and they call it the construction period. So the first 3 years of an abatement, the company can actually, bring the jobs up, the investment level. So they have 3 years from the date that the abatement kicks in. The abatement will not kick in until according to the auditor's office, until 40% of the construction is complete. So the abatement probably will not start more than likely until Jan 1, 24 is when it will start.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the information for us.
Thank you.
We're now to our report section, and Mr. Cox is out of town this evening and just made me aware that he did not have a report to share. I think they have a meeting next week. So we are to the superintendent's report. Ms. Allen.
I have a few things here this evening. We have talked a little bit each month about open positions. We are still looking for an intervention specialist. We are serving those students, but we still have an opening at Edgewood. We are looking for December graduates, but that's really the only lingering position. I would also just say substitutes, generally speaking, for teachers, bus drivers, just about every position are an area of concern across the district. So if people are interested in serving in that capacity, make sure they reach out to the district for information. Current enrollment is 5,486. We're still up 125 students from last year. Wanted to give you a quick construction update. Over the next few weeks, the central office is relocating to the Chestnut location. I'm going to have to get used to Chestnut. And communication went out to families today. Next Thursday and Friday, our offices will actually be closed due to that move, and we'll reopen at Chestnut on the 31st. So we'll be up and functional at that time. But
I think your email said phones will be available, though, like if somebody needs to call you.
I'm getting to that part. We'll still have emails and the same phone lines during that time. We'll just be working on getting things out of that office building, so things will be shut down. My open office hours will still take place at Edgewood on the 24th. On Halloween, the 31st, we just won't have any. We're not going to be settled in enough to have a conference room yet on that day, but we'll restart again on November 7th at the Chestnut location. We did receive an okay from the county this week to proceed with the demolition at Edgewood, so that is part of that push to get us moving out. Final permit drawings were submitted for Edgewood. No changes from what you have seen, so unless there are some changes required from the county, we should be good to go for the Edgewood building. So I also did want to talk briefly about the Edgewood incident from last week. I think as everyone is aware, we had an incident in the wooded area behind Edgewood. A student reported seeing a suspicious man in the woods. The building, the students were brought in off the playground. The building went into lockdown, and we worked with the Marysville Police Department to ensure that there was no one in the woods or surrounding areas. We continue to say to our students at every level, if you see something, say something. If you're uncomfortable, tell an adult. So we certainly are proud of the students for coming forward and letting an adult know when they felt uncomfortable. Again, this is one of our best strategies to help prevent problems. We're actually not, we were not able to get together until this coming Monday with the police department to do our debrief. They had some trainings this week. So we will be doing that Monday, but I have also talked to Tony at length about the elementary SROs. He assures me that they are in the interview process, and he fully understands our anxiousness to get them placed in the buildings. Once again, we have earmarked money in our budget to implement those, and we just are waiting on the city to go ahead and make those final recommendations. But principals are ready for them as well, so. I also wanted to highlight next week, I sent you an email today, I think it was today, that next week, Naven, that's kind of cool that it's tonight, isn't it? Yeah, sorry. Totally unplanned, but the interim state superintendent will be visiting Naven next week to see our MTSS process and literacy specifically. She will be visiting classrooms and talking to Lynette and Shelley and whoever else Lynette recruits to come, and Mark and I about some of the work we're doing around personalized learning and how MTSS is just a kind of a pillar in that overall umbrella. So we're excited to have that take place as well. We just found out this week.
Okay, that's it? All right. Anybody have any questions for her? Okay, sure, yeah.
I just want to thank the district and the Marysville Police Department for their quick action. It was a scary phone call to receive as a parent, but I rather it'd be scary and everything went well and there's no harm caused than not be prepared. And so I just do want to thank the district for the communication, the phone calls that were sent out timely and for keeping us assured. With the central office, is there a timeline to replace that sign? Right now, that sign in the front still says Hope Center. I know it's kind of it's kind of flipped backwards, but is there a timeline to at least get that sign updated?
Or one-sided. I'm not sure if one-sided has been, actually, Ryan and I talked about that briefly, but I'll get dates for you. And ours will have to come down as well, but I'll let you know when that's going to take place.
Okay. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Treasurer's report. Todd.
Okay, for my report, I'm presenting the November 5-year forecast. Okay, next slide, please. So the first slide I always like to look at is just kind of a high-level overview of the entire forecast, looking at revenues versus expenditures and the cash balance there. So the blue line is revenues, red line is expenditures, and we're looking back. We have actual numbers back to fiscal year 20. Projected years go all the way out to fiscal year 27. Of note, with revenues and expenditures, you'll see in fiscal year 23, which is our current fiscal year, we do have expenditures exceeding revenues. That's known as an operating deficit. That the deficit there is about $3.7 million, which means we're eating into our cash reserve or our ending cash balance. The green line there represents our ending cash balance, which has been extremely strong for the last several years. We ended fiscal year 22 very close to $30 million. We still project to end fiscal 23 in the high $20 million range. So we're very fortunate to have that strong ending cash balance. But as you can see with the revenues versus expenditures, that gap is only getting bigger, which you would expect when the revenues are staying relatively flat and expenditures are going up. Highlighting the revenue, and I'll get into a little more detail as we go. You can see, looking all the way back to fiscal year 20 and then all the way out to fiscal year 27, it's pretty much a straight line. There's some little ups and downs there, but really nothing of significance. Obviously, when you're a district that's growing in students, and also when you are experiencing the inflation that every organization is having to deal with, that's not a good recipe when your revenue is flat for all of this time. You can see the big gap towards fiscal 27. At that point, you've got expenditures projected around $73 million, revenues projected at $55.7 million. So the gap where expenditures are exceeding revenues in the fiscal year 27 is $17.4 million. And we're going to talk a little bit of that as we go and how we're going to address that. On the cash balance side, the cash balance in fiscal 23 is $25.6 million, and that's you're obviously starting to drop as expenditures exceeding revenue. You'll see in fiscal 26, the projection would be we would have a cash deficit at that time, and that deficit would be around $8 million, and that would balloon to $25 million in fiscal year 27. Okay, next slide, please. So this slide looks at the forecast from the perspective of the board's cash balance policy. The two factors involved there is one is maintaining 1 month of expenditures as an ending cash balance. As you can see, our ending cash balance, beginning in fiscal year 26 is where we would no longer meet that policy. We just barely pass the policy in fiscal year 25, but fiscal 26 and fiscal 27, we would be in violation of our policy. And then the other part of the policy is having expenditures can't exceed revenues by more than 1%. So we're in that boat right now. So in fiscal year 23, the current fiscal year, we do have expenditures exceeding revenues by more than 1%. So this kind of triggers the levy discussion that we've been having for the last couple years, knowing this was coming. Next slide. Looking at the revenues in the forecast, the one thing we like to always look at is the split of local versus state. These numbers are relatively similar to what I presented last May, although each number went up some. So the percentage is still the same, 55% local versus 45 state. That's a number that continues to shift. Usually each year the state share is shrinking and the local share is increasing. With one of the main piece of the state revenue is our state foundation funding. That's really been a hard thing to, I guess, predict every year, other than just assuming it's going to be flat, which has usually been the best way to predict it. In the past several years, I'll hit that on the next slide, so I won't go there yet. But I did note here that it looks like in this fiscal year we're going to come off of the guarantee and be a formula district. What that means is we would get some additional funding. So I'm projecting an increase of $350,000 compared to last year. I can say as of now that's still just a projection because we won't actually know those numbers for sure until October 26th. So as of now, we're still basically being funded off of last year's components, and then when October 26th comes, we'll get an update, and we'll see where we actually land. And also, even with that increase, the state funding is not keeping pace with inflation or student growth. Overall funding is flat or declining. Another increase in revenues is the other revenue, which is a small piece of the pie, but still significant. We, compared to our forecast in May, I've increased the projection this year by $400,000 in our interest revenues alone, which is a significant jump. Interest rates in Star, Ohio have increased by 300%. Compared to last year. So that's going to be a significant increase in revenue for us there. And then also another jump in revenue is due to the triennial update, which I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a future slide as well. But there's going to be an increase in our real estate tax revenue compared to our prior year projections, as the increase in values across the district are going to be higher than what was projected. That's going to be, I think it was around $350,000 increase in real estate tax revenues this year, and then the other half of that will come on in the following year. So that's a significant jump in revenues as well. Next slide, please. So this compares local versus state funding. Just kind of looking at our state funding formula, fiscal year 20, fiscal year 21, we were what's called a cap district. So you've got three options historically. You can be a cap district, a formula district, or a guarantee district. When you're a cap district, that means the formula calculates you should get X dollars, but there's not enough money in the budget to fund it, so you're actually getting less than you should. A guarantee district means, again, the formula says you should get X dollars, which is less than what you're getting, but to basically hold some districts harmless. Usually that's oftentimes a district that is losing students or something. The state will hold them harmless and keep them on the guarantee, meaning giving them more money than what they should be under the formula. And then the third option is being a formula district, which means you're, as components in the formula change, you change with them. Typically that would mean you get more money. So in 20 and 21, we were a cap district. In 22, we were a guarantee district. Up until June of 2022, we just came off of the formula as they added one more component that got updated with the new state funding formula. So our projection is that we're going to stay on the formula this year, which leads to that increase in funding. To project beyond that is difficult because, one, this is the last year of the biennium, so we'll have 2 new bienniums in this 5-year forecast, next year being one of them. Whether we stay on the formula or go on the guarantee, one will depend on how the state funds the formula. Do they pump more money into it to allow for growth? There's also a question of, do we even have the same funding formula next year? This was implemented just last year, and there was a lot of, I guess, not everybody was in favor of it at the state level, so I guess that'll be interesting to see where this ends up going.
Todd, if I could, you mentioned that we're going to have 2 biennium in this forecast. Could you explain what the biennium is, please?
The biennium is basically the state budget. So the $8 billion that they allocate, across all their different things that they fund, so that when you're looking at the state foundation formula for schools and what money you're going to get from the state, you only know to some level of certainty 2 years at a time. Because if there's, say, a major recession and they have to cut funding, well, you can be sure that school funding is one of the components they would cut, which would then end up likely, impacting our state foundation funding.
Yeah, so essentially every 2 years we could have a different formula, and that would generate either the same amount, more money, or less money, depending on whatever decisions the state makes. And we're going to go through 2 of those cycles.
Right. And I guess historically what's happened is they come up with a new formula, a new idea. This is the best way to fund a district, but it always costs more money. And when there's not enough money, you have to say, they don't have to, but fortunately they do. They say, well, we'll just put you on a guarantee so that you get the same amount as last year at least. So at least you're, so we're not funding the formula as fully because we don't have enough money, so we'll just keep you on the guarantee. I think the count this year is, the last I had heard, there's over 400 districts that are on a guarantee that are, so it's not that the formula is not working, but the formula is not being fully funded, which, that obviously costs more money to do that. Yep. So another big piece I'm sure you've heard plenty of by now is our TPP, the tangible personal property reimbursement. Cuts are continuing. That's a drop of $600,000 per year. So if you look at the red lines there you'll see those going down. That is because of the TPP reimbursement going away. My projection is that fiscal year 24 is the last year that we'll receive any real significant money. We may get a little bit in 25, but it would probably be a very insignificant amount. So we'll just call fiscal year 24 the last year that we'll receive any of that funding. So you can see in fiscal 25, the state funding line, the red line, kind of flattens out. That's because there's no more drop in TPP because it'll be fully gone, and I'm projecting state funding to stay flat. I feel like that's the safest bet. They have historically, given those guarantees and held you harmless to get at least what you got in the year before. I would say. I wouldn't see a large risk in it going down. The risk may be that we could get more funding, which would obviously be a good risk, and hopefully that's the case. And another point about I've made in the past of the TPP reimbursements going away, those began back in fiscal year 16, and we've been losing money since that time. So once we get to fiscal 25, the amount of money we will have lost because of that phase out will be $5.6 million, which is the equivalent of losing 5 mills. So if we had a 5 mill tax levy and it just went away, that's the equivalent of what's happened here, which is a big driving factor of the large gap that you're seeing between expenditures and revenues. Next slide, please. Just some general comments on our operating revenues. So I mentioned the triennial update. Just to give a little bit of information on that, because I think a lot of people will see that and be surprised, because with the triennial update, most people's values that live in the district are going to be going up significantly. What the triennial update is every 6 years the county auditor is required by law to update values of your house to put them in line with basically the real estate market. And the real estate market has been going crazy in the district for the last couple of years. So that's why you're going to see such a large increase. Those numbers won't be final until November, but our early estimates show that there's likely to be approximately a 23% average increase for residential properties. And I guess the main reason I want to bring that up is so people don't think, oh my goodness, my property just went up by 23%. That means my taxes are also going to go up by 23%. That's not how the triennial update works because of House Bill 920. And without going too far into the weeds, I just give my own house as an example, and I looked at people that I know, their house is in other areas such as Mill Valley, and it really stayed true there as well. So I think this is going to be a pretty common theme. My property went up by 23%. And then I looked at the tax rates that I'm being charged, which are pretty similar across the district. You're going to have a slight variation depending on where you live. But for me, that's about 53.6 mills. Only a portion of that millage is a voted millage, and then the other portion is called inside millage. And as we've talked with House Bill 920, as your values go up, the voted millage goes down, or the effective millage goes down, so that you don't see an increase in your taxes. So what that means is, for me, my property going up 23%, I'm actually only going to see an increase in my taxes by 5%. So still an increase, but not nearly as much as you might expect because of the impact of House Bill 920. And another question that we get a lot of times, I just thought I'd throw this out there. If you look at your tax rates on the county auditor website, and it's on the Where Do Your Taxes Go tab, of the mills that you're being charged, like I said, most people it's going to be around 53, 54 mills. About 65% of that is what goes to the school. So just for your own information, I guess. So that's the triennial update. So As I said, with the inside millage, you will see an increase in your taxes because of that inside millage. As a school district, we are allocated 4.7 inside mills. So as a school district, our revenue will go up on those 4.7 mills, and so that's why the increase in value from the triennial update will actually increase our revenue just because of that inside millage. As I mentioned, state foundation revenue is up, projected to be up. That would be 1.6%. If you look back, the total that we're projected to receive this year, even with that increase, is actually less than what we received in fiscal year 21. And I'm projecting fiscal year 27 in total revenue to be less than what we received this year because of the drop off in TPP and then other revenues remaining relatively flat. So with state funding dropping and then staying flat, where do we make up the difference? That's going to have to come from local revenue. I should point out, we did have a bump in federal revenue the last couple years with that ESSER funding. So that has definitely been beneficial and beneficial to our taxpayers. But that will be going away as well. And I'll hit that in a future slide coming up here as well. As I mentioned, real estate taxes are projected, revenues are going to go up this year by about 3.6% based on projections. But the bad news is the increase there is pretty much entirely wiped away by the decrease in TPP, leaving our funding again pretty much flat this year. And I guess I would point out, especially as we are, going to be talking about a levy later here on this presentation, out of 607 school districts in Ohio, we have the 16th lowest local tax effort. So local tax effort, and I'll just read this here, local tax effort reflects the extent of the effort residents of a school district make in supporting public education in terms of portion of residents' income devoted to school taxes. So kind of in layman's term, it looks at the amount of taxes that you pay to the school district versus your ability to pay. So you could have a really high local tax effort if your community is extremely poor, even though they might be paying a small amount of taxes. And on the flip side, you could have a really low tax effort even though you're maybe paying a whole lot of taxes, but you're extremely wealthy. So if you look at us being the 16th lowest in the entire state out of 607, when you that far on the right or the left is kind of an anomaly. And when it comes to local tax effort, there's really two reasons you would be an anomaly there. One would be extreme wealth, or two would be extremely low tax rates. I think you can look and say, I think our community is doing quite well, but we're not extremely wealthy. If you look at some of the districts in there that are above us in that top 15, you've got one district whose average income in the community is close to $400,000. So I'm sure they're paying a lot more taxes than we are, but even with that, because their income is so high, that puts them, I think they were number one. So the reason that we're number 16, even again, I would say that we do have a relatively strong average income. It's not really out of the ordinary, and it really doesn't even compare to some of our other Central Ohio school districts. We do have an extremely low tax rate, and really it's almost as low as it can go.
Todd, can you define what the local tax effort is? What are they looking at? Is it income, property taxes, and then what's the correlation with that with the state funding formula?
Well, I wouldn't say there's no direct correlation. The local tax effort is more just a data point, and it's looking at income versus property tax rates towards the school district. That's specifically what that judges. Having said that it doesn't directly tie to the state funding formula, there are components of the state funding formula that would somewhat tie to that, even though it's not an exact measure. So the state funding formula does look at property values in the district. If you have high property values, which we do, the state funding formula would look at that as a way to say you can afford to pay more locally. The state funding formula also looks at median or average income of district residents, and again, if that's a large number compared to other districts, that would be something where they would say, you could afford to pay more. So being number 16 on this list, the state's not looking for ways to funnel more money to us. And I think I mentioned, maybe I didn't, sorry, but so we're likely to hit the 20, I don't think I did mention it yet, so sorry, getting mixed up here. So we are likely to hit the 20 mil floor by fiscal year 26, if not sooner. So because of the huge jump in valuation that we're going to hit with the triennial update, we're going to be really close to the 20 mil floor, most likely in 2023. We'll probably be at 20 point something effective mills. Really, that doesn't have a major impact, most likely, until the next update, which would be the reappraisal by the county auditor in fiscal year 26. So at that point, if we are on the 20 mil floor, that would lead to a jump in revenue because we are on the 20 mil floor, and that the forecast reflects that. So you're seeing a little bit of a jump in real estate tax revenues in those out years.
Yeah, Todd, could you talk about what the 20 mil floor is, please?
I was hoping to avoid that, but yes, I will. So the 20 mil floor, we talked a little bit about the inside millage. From a functional standpoint, once you've gotten to the 20 mil floor, it's like all your millage is now inside mills, because the state, according to state law, 20 mills is the absolute minimum that a school district has to assess. So like I said, right now our millage is around 23.5, and as values go up, property tax, the effective tax rate gets rolled down so that you pay about the same amount in taxes. Well, once you hit, it rolls all the way down to 20, it can't go down any further. So if your value goes up and you're at 20 on the tax rates, the 20 cannot go down any further. That means that inflationary increase on your taxable value will lead to an increase in revenue to the school district.
Okay. So we're collecting about as little as the law allows.
Correct.
Is that correct? Thank you.
Do you have a question, Bill?
Yeah, I guess if we hit the floor and we have a 20% evaluation, would that mean a 20% tax increase at that point in time?
In the future, so this triennial update is happening before we've hit the floor. So, but if we came to the reappraisal in 2026 and there was, let's say, a 10% increase, then yes, that would basically lead to a 10% increase in taxes as well as 10% increase in revenue. Okay, next slide, please. So this is looking at our taxable values. The 2022, even though we have tentative numbers, I didn't include it in here because those aren't official yet. So we had an increase of 2.15 for tax year 21. That mainly is due to new construction, which we've talked in the past. New construction does lead to increased revenue for the district, so that's good to see. As I mentioned, the next updates in 2022, I'm projecting, when I say 15%, that's an overall projection, so that's going to include commercial and public utility personal property, is why you're seeing 15%, whereas I said around 24%, that's going to be just residential. Usually a triennial update doesn't have as large an effect on commercial properties because commercial properties aren't typically bought and sold as often as residential. So the impact on the commercial will not be as high. Interesting point here, again, as we talk about an upcoming levy and I guess balancing the impact on our local taxpayers. You can see our commercial values under Class 2 for 21, they jumped to $172 million. But looking back at 2006, they were $173 million. So our commercial property values have really not kept pace with our residential values, since we're actually not quite up to where we were in 2006. But our residential property values have increased by $230 million in that same time frame. So it'll be important to increase that balance, or I guess improve the balance, so that the commercial was paying a little more share than the residential. Next slide, please. So this looks at our expenditures. Salaries and benefits make up 89% of our operating costs. That's pretty much the general number for most any school district because we're a service-oriented organization. You would see a jump in fiscal year 25 in total expenditures due to the ESSER funds being fully spent, and that would be about $900,000. So what I'm saying there is last year, this year, and next year, there are certain, I can't remember off the top of my head the number of employees we have that are being paid out of ESSER funds. Those aren't new employees. Those aren't employees where we said, hey, we've got some one-time money, let's go hire new people. Those are people that were existing employees that were being paid out of the general fund. We then took that ESSER money and used it to pay for them to save the general fund and our taxpayers' money for about a 3-year period. And then once it was spent, now that those people will be coming back onto the general fund. So just wanted to be clear that we didn't use that money to hire new people. We actually used it to save our taxpayers' money. In expenditures, one of the biggest variables is benefits, and specifically our insurance. That's been something we've talked a lot in the past. We had some really bad years in the past. Things had really leveled off, and we had really gotten things under control. This year has been a bad year, so we'll see what happens. Right now we're projecting, and I think we've got a 9% increase in the forecast projections, and in the out years we've got 8%. Probably looking back just a couple years ago, those projections were at 10, so I've dropped them down a little bit. At that time it seemed more realistic, and because we were looking to be well below that, so we'll see how that plays out. Another increase that you'll see in the forecast that we've talked about is the school resource officers, adding those to each elementary school. That's an increase to the forecast of $450,000 as compared to last year, because those were not in the forecast last year. Looking at total expenditures, just that upward trend, that's an average increase of about 4.5%. I guess you can have your opinion one way or the other if it should be higher or lower than 4.5%, but you look at inflation of over 8% this year. I feel like we're actually doing pretty good, and the other thing to keep in mind is we're growing by about 100 students per year. So to maintain that relatively steady growth in expenditures, I think speaks to our fiscal conservativeness. One thing where I did actually increase the payroll projections, I got a little more aggressive with our payroll projections and hiring of staff. In the past, a lot of times when we would maybe hire a few new teachers due to growth in students, we would be able to hire those new teachers based on savings from, maybe we had 6 or 7 teachers retire that might have been at the top of the salary schedule. You replace those with teachers that are now at the bottom of the salary schedule. The savings there can pay for 2 or 3 new staff members. We're at a point now where, at least for a certain time period, there's not as many people at the top of that salary schedule or as close to retirement. So I don't think we're going to be having that savings to cover the new staff that we're going to need to hire for our new students that are coming in. So I've basically increased the hiring projections due to that fact. Next slide, please. Looking at our levy history, You should know this by heart by now. So we've had one new money issue passed since 1998. So there was a 5 mil replace and a 4 mil new passed back in 2008, which would, we're going to be talking about a levy for 2023. So that's a 15-year time period since our last new money levy. Prior to that 2008 levy, the last new money issue was back in 1998, so a 10-year gap there, and that was an 8.9 mil levy. You may remember back in November of 18, we passed the 6.56 mil levy, which was a renewal. That was not new money. And all of our current levies are continuing levies. We're currently projecting, as we saw, the need for a levy in May of 2023, and I noted there that that's a promise kept, because at the time when we went in 2018, we said if you pass this if you pass this renewal levy for us, we won't come back until 2022 at the earliest. So we've actually kept that promise and extended it by a year to getting to 2023. And as you saw in our first slide there, the lack of revenue growth combined with enrollment growth, we're looking at a potential levy cycle where as we continue to grow in students, if we don't have some type of revenue growth to accompany that each year, we would be back on the ballot every 3 to 4 years like many Central Ohio districts are. Next slide. This one looks at some levy scenarios and assumptions. So this is just some general discussion about looking at the upcoming levy. We tried to go at it from every angle we could think of because nobody wants to go on the ballot. Nobody wants to have to ask for a tax increase. But if we're going to do it, we want to make sure we do it right and we go for the amount that we need. So different assumptions. One assumption is that we can't cut our way out of a levy. We can't just make budget cuts and say, let's just spend less money and then we don't have to ask for a tax increase. First off, we're growing. In the forecast right now, we're projecting, and based on our enrollment study, which has been accurate so far, we're projecting on average 100 new students each year. I won't be surprised if that number or if that enrollment study within the next 4 or 5 years maybe becomes outdated and we'll start growing a little faster because you're really starting to see developments pop up. So considering that we're growing, if we said right now we're just not going to spend any more money, that's already in itself a cut. That would be a budget cut not to spend more money because as you have new students, you need to hire new teachers, you need to buy more supplies, those kinds of things. But if you looked at just to throw the scenario out, if we made cuts starting next year to say we're not going to pass the levy, we're just doing budget cuts. If we wanted to stay off of the ballot for 4 years after that, we would have to make $8 million in cuts next year. And I'm not saying that would all be in payroll, but since 90% of our expenditures are payroll and benefits, the majority would come out of there. I'm sure we could find some other smaller amounts out of other areas, but just for this scenario purpose, I just showed it all as payroll. That would be on average about 115 positions. Or if we said, let's make cuts next year so that we can stay off of the ballot for 3 years. That would be $6 million in cuts, which would equate to about 85 positions. Another assumption we made when making our levy decision is we decided we don't want to be on the ballot again for at least 4 years. We don't want to pass a levy and then come right back to the community 2 or 3 years later and say, hey, we need another levy. We don't want to have voter fatigue where people feel like you're just coming back for another tax increase. We just passed the last one. So we feel like we want to stay off the ballot for at least 4 years after we pass this levy. So looking at some potential scenarios there, some might look at our cash balance this year of about $25 million and say, well, you've got that large cash balance, why do you need a levy? Why don't we just wait? Well, we talked about the revenues versus expenditures and how much expenditures are exceeding revenues. That's why we can't wait, because the number that number is only growing, which means we're eating into that cash balance very quick. If we were to not go on the ballot in 2023 and we said, well, because we've got this large cash balance, let's wait and go on 2024. If we did that, a 9.9 mil levy would only get us 2 years. So we would pass a 9.9 mil levy in 2024. We'd be back on the ballot in 2026 to ask for another levy. On the flip side, if we're going in 2023, but we said, well, yeah, but we've got this large balance, so we want to ask for as small a levy as we can. I mean, and you could create any kind of number you wanted here, but just for example, we could say, well, next year, let's pass a 4.9 mil levy. That would only get us 2 years. That would get us to 2025, where we would then have to come back and pass another levy. To get that 4.9 mils to get us out 4 years, we would have to, in addition to the 4.9 mils, we would need to cut approximately $3 million to get us out to 27. And then $3 million from a payroll position standpoint would equate to about 43 positions, which is the equivalent of about an entire elementary building staff. So each of our elementaries on average is around 45 positions. Another assumption is passing a levy that requires cutting education or services is not a benefit to the community. You know, we don't want to put in this work. We've built up the district to the successful district it is. We don't want to put in the work to pass a levy and say, you know, great, we passed the levy. By the way, we're making all these cuts. So we want to pass a levy that will be able to maintain and grow what we've built up here and to continue to serve the community. And finally, when it comes to, there's several different options when it comes to type of levy that you can pass. The recommendation we would be making would be a 5-year emergency levy. One of the driving factors there is when you do a 5-year emergency levy and then it comes time to renew or replace that levy, if you replace that levy as opposed to renewing in 5 years, it allows you to capture the growth that has happened in the district. So 5 years from now, I would say it would be a safe estimate that there's going to be several hundred new homes in the district at that time. So if we were to replace that 5-year emergency levy at that time, we could capture the growth of all of those new houses, meaning everybody who was paying taxes that lived here previously on that levy, they could pay the same amount that they were paying previously. All the new homes in the district could begin to pay equivalent, which would then mean new revenue to the district from those new homes. That's the difference of a replacement versus a renewal. Next slide, please. So taking those factors into account, in looking at what we feel like would be a levy that would be helpful to the district, and also one that the community could get behind, we came up with 2 options that we wanted to discuss, I guess that were reasonable enough to show them here. The first option would be a 7.9 mil emergency levy. So I've basically inserted what that would do to our revenues and expenditures and that cash balance there. A 7.9 mil levy would generate approximately $8.5 million annually. We would begin, if we were to pass that levy in May of 23, we would begin collecting that revenue in 2024. So we would, from a fiscal year standpoint, in fiscal year 24, we would get half of that revenue, and then in fiscal 25, we would begin the full collection, which would be $8.5 million. From a taxpayer standpoint, the 7.9 mils would equate to a tax bill of $553 per year on a $200,000 home. The thing I don't like about the 7 mil levy is if you look at the red line versus the blue line, revenues versus expenditures, if we pass a 7.9 mil levy, at no point do revenues exceed expenditures. We'd be passing a levy that even with the levy, we're still going to have an operating deficit every year of the forecast, which means we're continuing to eat into our cash balance, our cash reserve.
Tom,
I would say, yes.
If we're spending more money than what our income is, does that violate our cash policy?
It would violate our cash policy, correct. Now, we're allowed to violate our cash policy as long as we have a plan. So it's not the same as, for instance, violating an ODE policy. So, yep. And then, so if you look at those, at the ending cash balance, that fiscal year 27 number there is around $5 million is where I would project we would be there. Because of that, I would say if we went with the 7.9, there's a good chance, I would say a very good chance, we would be back on the ballot in 3 years. Now, at the same time, there's a chance that maybe it would get us to 4, but that would be, you know, when you look at the risks in the forecast, there's positive risks and negative risks. So for this to get to 4 years, all of the positive risks would have to happen and none of the negative risks could happen. So I would not feel confident that we would make it to 4 years because you don't want to just stretch it to get there just to get there and then get to the point where, you know, you stretched it so thin that you've got to come back with a 12 mil levy or a 13 mil levy just to get you past. So the next slide shows a 9.9 mil emergency levy. Generates approximately $10.7 million per year. As you can see, it still doesn't show revenues exceeding expenditures, but it gets really close there in a couple years. And if a couple things went the right way, such as maybe we actually stay on the formula for a couple years, there's a chance we could actually have revenues exceeding expenditures a couple years there. Again, this isn't a silver bullet that we pass this levy, we're not going to be back on the ballot at some point. That's really not where we're at right now. But a 9.9 mil levy, from a tax standpoint, that would be $693 per year on a $200,000 home. The ending cash balance there in fiscal 27 would project to be $12.4 million. And again, I would say with some confidence that this would allow us to give a levy promise of 4 years, meaning if we pass this 9.9 mil levy, we won't be back until 2027. Now, you put a little asterisk beside there. If state funding gets cut in half, that whole idea gets blown out of the water. But that's if these assumptions stay relatively stable, that would allow us to do that. We presented these options to our Finance Committee meeting earlier this week. Through conversation with them, the 9.9 mil is what they landed on as their recommendation. The 9.9 mil is what I would recommend to the board. Looking at next steps on the next slide. So for an emergency levy, the board must certify to the county auditor a resolution declaring the necessity of an additional tax levy to avoid an operating deficit no later than the 100th day before the election. So the election that we would recommend going on would be May 2nd of 2023. So 100 days prior to that would be January 20th. So what I'm saying there is if we are going to go on the May ballot, we would need to, as the board would need to pass a resolution prior to January 20th. My recommendation would be to do that sometime in November or December so that we're ahead of time to get that information to the county auditor. And also just kind of looking ahead, because like I said, this levy is not a silver bullet. Like I said, with the local tax effort just shows that we've really got some catching up to do if we're going to be able to maintain the school district that we've built it up to be. We're in the process of creating a facilities committee to determine building need because we're seeing growth. If I were to make a projection right now, we would probably need a new building sometime towards the end of this decade, sometime between 27 and 2029, if these the growth continues as it is. So we're working on a committee that will help determine, what that looks like. What does that new building look like? What grade level type building would we be building? And as we've talked in the past, if we do build a new building, that requires a bond issue to build the building, but it also requires an operating levy to staff that building and to operate that building. So there's not a lot of great timing when it comes to this levy that we're looking to pass next year would be likely need renewed around 27, 28. There's a chance that we may need to build a new building around 27, 28, and the levy that we're passing now, once it's renewed, we're still going to need an additional levy around that same time because of where our cash balance would be at that time. Unless, again, like, you know, there's major changes in the assumptions, major increases in state funding or that, but I not looking for that to happen.
Okay. As a taxpayer, what I hear you say is that if we vote for the recommended levy, that will get us to 2027. And then your recommendation would be to replace it, which means that a taxpayer like me, my taxes would stay essentially the same, and we would capture new growth.
Correct.
That would happen between now and 2027.
Exactly. And the reason we would want to do that is because we know we're going to need a new levy at that time anyway. By replacing the existing levy, assuming that that one passes, that would hopefully reduce the amount of the ask of the next levy in that same time frame.
Yeah, and you know, the amounts and so forth have to be determined because that's too far out. And then if we're looking at a building and an operating levy there, as a taxpayer, the building and the new operating levy, 2027, 28, at some point out there would be where I would then see another tax increase.
Yeah, and then also for our long-term planning there, we've talked, you know, to help reduce the ask on that side is that in 2029, our bonds would be fully paid off. So right now, I think the number is around, it's a little over 6 mills, that if you look at your, where do my taxes go, 6 of those mills are going to pay off the debt from building our existing buildings. So when those are all fully paid off in 2029, those 6 mills would go away. But I'm pretty confident we're going to need to build a new building at that point. So what we would ask for would be a hopefully no new millage, or if not, it would be much reduced. We would say, well, you've got 6 mills or whatever that is at that point going away. Let us keep collecting that same 6 mills, and maybe we need to add a couple to it. You know, that's too far out to really say where we would be. But again, that's, I guess, the silver lining in all of this kind of bad timing converging all at once. The silver lining would be, 1, looking at a replacement levy to reduce the impact on existing taxpayers, and 2, bonds being paid off and that millage going away.
All right, so that would, as a taxpayer, I would be able to look out 6, 7 years before, with all of the factors and so forth, I would be looking out 6, 7 years, maybe 8 years before I would see an increase in the amount of tax that I would be paying to the school system. Is that generally fair, or is that overly optimistic?
Well, I would say it's, I wouldn't say overly optimistic or fair. I would just say that's too far out to make a projection. So I wouldn't make that kind of promise. I would say we're looking out for our taxpayers' best interest, and plans are in place to where either, you know, our goal would be for it not to be an increase, but if it were to be an increase, our goal is to make it as minimal as possible. And we've been planning for that for several years, because, you know, I live in the district, I pay taxes in the district, and I don't like to see them go up any more than anyone else.
Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. As you know, as I listened to that, I thought kind of the first step is just to make sure, as a board, is everybody comfortable with the May 23 levy ask? You know, looking at the 5-year forecast, everybody agree that timing is what we need to be looking at. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to assume that everybody's on that same page. So, you know, I know, like we have, for those of us who have been on the board for a long time, you know, we've been talking, like Todd said, since 2018, since that renewal and everything. At that time is when we talked about, you know, we're not going to be on the ballot until 2022. And then, you know, in part because of ESSER funds, and then just a lot of other strategic, really thoughtful ways of hiring and using our resources, we've been able to extend that to, you know, until 2023. But, you know, looking at the 5-year forecast and that gap between the revenues and expenditures, you know, and knowing that if we wait another year, it's just going to be, the ask will have to be bigger. So are we all okay with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Todd, do you happen to know off the top of your head our per student expenditure?
Multiple ways to measure that. The simplest way is just to look at the ODE calculation, and I think the ODE calculation is around a little over $11,000 per pupil.
That's ours.
Yes. And that's below the state average.
That was my next question.
Yep.
What's the state average?
I think the state average is, I think it's in the 12s and maybe 13.
I know, I was thinking it was
Now, you know,
close
I'm
to
not saying
13.
we're not near the bottom. You know, if you're in a district where your per pupil expenditure is at the bottom, you're probably in a district you don't want your kids to go to.
Right.
So we're not saying we're that, but we're saying, you know, we're doing a pretty good job.
Right. So the other thing I want to point out is that we do have a special meeting scheduled for November 2nd, and the big part of that meeting is for us to have in-depth conversations about this. So, you know, I'm not trying to eliminate questions tonight or comments tonight, but just make sure everybody knows that we're really going to be focusing on that on November 2nd. You know, Todd gave us the timeline, the latest being January 20th. I agree. I would love if we could have something on at the very latest, our November meeting. I think that allows our levy committee time to really, you know, come up with their materials and information to educate our community. So that's, you know, that's my thought right now. So, I mean, having said that, if there are, you know, if there are some questions that you really would like to have answered right now from Todd, any clarification so that between now and November 2nd, you know, you can be processing things in your brain, also taking that time to talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, and, you know, get input from them, find out if they have questions as well. Sure.
With the 9.9 mil 5-year emergency levy, revenues still do not exceed expenditures for, I mean, if there's still a deficit.
Correct.
Are most districts operating at a deficit? Can you, I feel a little bit nervous. I know we still have the cash reserve balance, but can you give some more insight?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to all, you know, I didn't do a study, but I can tell you in general, my assumption would be that, one, we're in a unique situation because we're one of a small number of districts that is losing the TPP reimbursement. There's only a small number of districts that are getting that revenue. So from, you know, there's a good and bad to that. From the good side, because we've had that revenue, we haven't asked our taxpayers for more money. But from the bad standpoint of that, our tax rates are so low that we can't afford for that to go away. So if you look at most districts in Central Ohio, it's more of a stair step. So you're going to pass a levy, revenues will exceed expenditures, which will grow your cash balance. Then you'll have two or 3 years where expenditures now exceed revenues, and now it's time to go back for a levy, and it's repeat. You know, you just continue to have that stair step where revenues go up, then they stay flat, and expenditures continue to go up, and that's where you get onto the levy cycle.
My second question is, say if there's a dramatic shift towards building more apartments than single-family homes, the reason why I'm interested in that is because the affordability of home ownership continues to go up. and a lot are priced out of that because they don't qualify to purchase a home. Will that throw off the projection study if we develop more apartments compared to single-family homes? Would that throw off our revenue projection?
It would change it. I guess you would have to take it case by case. I mean, for one, if we build an apartment complex and there's a tax abatement included on that, that's not great. If there's a new apartment complex and there's no tax abatement and there's not very many kids in that apartment, that actually would be good from a financial standpoint, because that would be new revenue without a lot of kids. But then if you have an apartment complex that's full of 200 kids, that would be detrimental to the forecast, because they're not paying as much property taxes as a single family home would be with that many kids. So it really depends on the value of the apartment. Is there an abatement or not, and how many kids are coming out of it?
Thanks for those questions, which kind of made me think about, obviously, we would love more commercial properties.
Right.
Without a lot of abatements. Right. Any other questions or comments right now? Okay, thank you, Todd. That was a lot of really good information.
Thank you for staying awake.
I want to thank your finance committee too. The members on there have been serving for as long as I've been on the board, and I know they're just really invested in our community and our school district, and so they put a lot of thought into their recommendations. So, thank you. Okay, my report is up next. We did have a community coffee earlier this month, and I believe Nan and Jermaine were there?
Correct.
Yep, and had a couple people come and talk to you.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And any want to update or anything that you want to share?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we just had a couple people come and visit. They wanted to talk about, number one, in regards to our strategic plan, what type of engagement activities, especially at the middle school level, were there. Middle school is a prime time for, a lot of difficult emotions and a lot of growth pains, and kids feel a little disconnected, so they want to know about ways that the district was going to reach out to the students and help them feel connected and safe within their learning environment. And then second person was very interested in the growth of the school district and how much we were growing, what percentage we were growing, and kind of the future, financial future of the district. So,
okay, thank you. It just kind of made me think when you were talking about engagement and stuff. My next comment on here was our building visits, which made me think about our visit to Bunsold, and it's always, I just love that visit, listening to all of the things that they do for their students there. And it seems like every year when we go in there, they're just tweaking things here and there and just trying to find ways to engage with the students and try and find what their passions are and try and make sure they support them where they need help. So I don't know if anyone else wanted to make a comment about their building visits right now. You're welcome to. Otherwise, kind of appreciate all of our staff for allowing us to come in and, walk into classrooms sometimes and get the kids all riled up, and then we leave, right? But we did get to see some butter being churned, and that looked like a lot of fun. Okay, next wanted to mention that October is National Bullying Prevention Month, and kind of tied into that, back on September 12th, the Ohio School Boards Association sends out a briefcase email to all school board members, and they had an article in there about our Marysville High School and Early College High School High Five React Club, and how they had created an anti-bullying game, and as we all know, won the first high school national competition last spring. So just kind of wanted to comment on how much I appreciate our district's focus on building relationships and encouraging every student to be involved in activities and really trying to minimize or eliminate that whole bullying kind of stuff. So Another thing, October is also National Manufacturing Month in Union County, so the city and the county both had proclamations on that, and I just wanted to highlight one section of that proclamation where they talk about how the city and county jointly recognize the importance of a thriving manufacturing sector and work to fuel economic growth and build a future for our citizens, and then they follow up with the prosperity of our community depends on the education and vocational opportunities that align with manufacturers' skilled labor needs. So I just thought that was nice because I know how much we welcome opportunities to partner with our businesses and professionals to help prepare our students and try and help that workforce gap that we're dealing with right now. Tomorrow morning at the Early College High School, they're going to hold their first STEM Solutions Day from 7:45 to 10:45, and there's going to be professionals from our community that are going to come in and share real-world problems that they're dealing with right now, and then they're going to ask some teams of students under the oversight of a staff member for each team to work on those problems and see what kinds of solutions they can come up with, and then they'll present those solutions. I don't know if it's at the like right before Christmas or something, or maybe it's sooner than that, I don't know. So if you're available, I encourage you to stop by and watch that tomorrow morning. And then, as we all know, OSBA Capital Conference is November 13th to 15th. There is a public records training on Tuesday the 15th. We are required to either go to that training or have somebody go for us, and Todd is always generous and attends that for us. And then that's also, Nan's going to be attending the business meeting where they vote on resolutions to be added to the legislative platform. We all got copies of that legislative platform. Looking through it, I thought there were some items that were really relevant for our district, like some platforms about opposing term limits and changes to term lengths for school board members, opposing reductions in opportunities of when you could put levies on the ballot, encouraging a more holistic approach to the state report card, some things like that. So if there are any concerns or questions that we have for Nan, we need to share them now because Capital Conference will be before our next board meeting. So if you do have any, reach out to her or, even ask right now. And if there are no questions about that, let's see. The only other thing to have on your calendar in the future is, that I'm aware of right now, is Economic Development, or ED 411, which several of us have attended that. It's an annual event held at Ohio State University. It's a half-day program. Our Union County Chamber, Economic Development, part always invites us to attend for free. So we have that registration information, and it's usually a really interesting, helpful, just to learn about some of those things and attend different workshops, breakout sessions that they have. So that's it for my report. Student Achievement Report, Nan.
For student achievement, I went ahead and forwarded everyone the email on student achievement. You can look through the flyer on your spare time. And just a reminder about Capital Conference on November 13th through the 15th. And I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Legislative report, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Hopefully everybody received the report. The state legislature is not in session at this point. They will have their first sessions on November the 16th. I had a meeting with Representative Richardson as she's on the Finance Committee. As I said, I shared with her some of the information that we have on our school finance, and we discussed briefly a potential levy for the school district. We've got a meeting that will happen on November the 4th. Senator Reineke will be coming into town to talk with Diane Ashley Thompson about what we're doing in the district. He's been very interested in what we're doing, having visited last spring. And this meeting is a result of a conversation that he and I had the beginning of September. So looking forward to the opportunity for him to be able to learn more about what we're doing here in Marysville. The rest of my report is mostly information, and you may have seen most of it from other sources. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Dick? Okay, then Safety and Drug Committee report, please.
Yes, so we have a resolution on, and I'll withhold any comments until we read that resolution. So, but it is National Red Ribbon Week, and this was implemented back in the late 80s because of a DAA agent who lost his life in service to really fighting the cartels and trying to prevent drugs from flowing into our communities. So we have a resolution on our agenda tonight, and we'll talk about that. Secondly, I attended the Union County Suicide Prevention Coalition. They have a youth subcommittee, and they're advertising an event for Friendsgiving. It's Friday, December 9th from 5:30 to 8. It's going to be at the YMCA, and so they want obviously students, but also supporters of our youth to attend and that Friendsgiving. They have a youth subcommittee that meets the first Wednesday of every month from 4 to 5 at the PASS office in Marysville. So if you need that information, I can send this flyer out to the board. And the youth subcommittee, they are looking to how do we encourage empathy, decrease social isolation, and increase hope, plan for upcoming holiday event, and to also collect data and determine whether or not bullying is a key component to youth suicide. With that said, I had a offline conversation and really wanted to connect them with Mr. Gallagher. Not that they're not connected, but really to have an intentional meeting to see so they can learn what our district is doing in this regard. And I think hopefully that would help benefit. I think any subcommittee should study what's already being done and then see where we can move forward from there, or any tweaks or changes we need. So that concludes my report. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much. Next, we are to the business portion of our meeting. I would accept a motion to approve draft minutes from our September 15th regular meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Savage.
Second.
Second by Mr. Smith. Roll call, please.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Keck?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. Next, I would accept a motion to approve the resolution in support of Red Ribbon Month 2022.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Ferguson.
Second.
Second by Mr. Keck. First, I would just like to thank Mr. Ferguson for providing and suggesting this resolution. I also attended the event, the Red Ribbon Week kickoff, and I thought I wish there would have been more people there first, but we saw a lot of really good data, I thought, some decreases in use amongst our youth over the last 10 years. And then the keynote speaker was Ohio State women's head hockey coach Nadine Meseral. She was Ohio State they were last year's national champions for hockey. What an impressive lady she was. And I know, Jermaine and I both talked to her at one point, and she just said she would love to be able to get in front of some of our students. She lives in Marysville, so hopefully we'll find some way to connect with her. Anyways, yeah.
Thank you. I would like to read the resolution for the record, if that's okay. Whereas alcohol and drug abuse affects individuals, families, and communities across the nation, and whereas substance abuse is particularly damaging to one of our most valuable resources, our children, and whereas it is imperative that visible, unified prevention education efforts by community members be implemented to encourage youth and adults to live healthy, substance-free lifestyles. Whereas the Marysville Exempted Village School District is committed to the safety and wellness of our students and staff. Whereas the Union County Drug-Free Coalition is determined to empower Union County youth and adults through a whole community approach. and in honor of National Red Ribbon Week, will commence a locally themed campaign titled Prevention, It Takes All of Us. And whereas the National Family Partnership sponsored the National Red Ribbon Week campaign promoting the message, celebrate life, live drug-free. Now, therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Marysville Exempted Village School District does hereby proclaim October 2022 as Red Ribbon Month and encourages its staff, students, parents, guardians, mentors, and community partners to participate in drug prevention education activities, not only during Red Ribbon Month, but also throughout the year, making a visible statement that we are all strongly committed to living a healthy, drug-free lifestyle. Be it further resolved that the Marysville Exempted Village School District Board of Education urges its students and staff to pledge to celebrate life and live drug-free. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments about the resolution? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Keck? I'm sorry, Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Keck?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. Next on the agenda, I would accept a motion to approve the Community Reinvestment Area Tax Exemption Agreement.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Smith,
Second.
second by Mr. Keck. Comments? Comments?
I think, this, again, as I said earlier, strong communities consist of a robust economic development program and strong, high-quality public education. And so I appreciate the district, Diane and Todd's negotiation efforts to secure the most revenue that we can while meeting the objectives of the economic development team. While I do have some hesitation about making sure we keep the 75 jobs, the payroll amount, and the partnership, I want to make sure that we are diligent in keeping this agreement to those standards. And so that's my thoughts, and I look forward to supporting this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I know, one of the things that we talked about is that there is legislation out there that, they can, for economic development purposes, there are some things that they can approve without having to ask the board to approve. And I also appreciate the negotiations that Diane and Todd did to get us pretty much close to what it would be if they just did what was legally allowed. So I feel like we're trying to, work hard to try and bring in as much as we can for our district and move forward from there. So
I'm happy to have all the commercial development we can get.
Yes.
It's the housing development with the incentives that are a concern to me.
Yeah, I kind of share what Jermaine mentioned earlier in that holding people accountable to the agreements that we have, I think is important, and the fact that there's an annual review, I think is an important component of that. So.
all right, roll call, please.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Keck?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. Next, I would accept a motion to approve the treasurer CFO action items.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Savage,
Second.
second by Mr. Ferguson. Any questions or comments? Yeah, Todd, did you have anything that you wanted to
I just would
highlight?
note that the cash flow is, on expenditure side, is pretty much on track, so not a lot to note there. On the revenue side, you're going to see other revenues are exceeding projections because of that interest revenue piece mainly. And then those projections will be updated next month based on the 5-year forecast. Only thing that really looks funky is there's a negative number in real estate tax revenues, but that's really just an accounting thing, not a revenue thing, and it's just moving money around based on the advances we received in prior months. So really our those property taxes are really right on track with where we
Right.
expected.
Yeah, when you look at the totals for
Correct.
revenue and expenses, they're pretty much right on, so. I would note there were some nice, as always, we appreciate all the donations in there for a variety of things, and we continue to see additional activity funds out there, something like the Library Club, a Spanish Honor Society, National Honor Society, so again, it's just more ways for our students to be involved and to be recognized. Roll call, please.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Keck?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes?
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. And finally, I would accept a motion to approve the superintendent items.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Smith,
Second.
second by Mr. Keck. Diane?
Just have a few things I'd like to highlight in there. First of all, we recognized Donna Lodge last month, but she is officially on the retirement after 25 years of service. So going to miss her greatly, just as an update to the board at this time, and just, pending our decision for upcoming money as well. We are not going to replace that position. That's why you see an increase for Michelle Thrush. So we want to definitely wish Donna well, and we're going to miss her in the office for sure. You'll see supplementals, building volunteers. I feel like I have a lot this month, so I apologize. There are several first read policies, most of which are just to get us in line with changes. There is one first read that is a new policy. It's a policy that sets guidelines for release time for religious instruction. This policy is aligned to Ohio Revised Code. Just so you're aware, in absence of this policy, each situation would have to be handled on an individual basis. So that's really the interest in having something in place, so there will be consistent action across the buildings, and provide some clarity for families who may be interested. Substitute teacher resolution really allows for us for the next 2 years to adopt the changes that the state has made with requirements to be a substitute teacher. And as I mentioned, we continue to struggle even when that qualification has changed. You also have a boundary change for elementary students. I think I actually sent that one to you early. Just so that would be the new development on 31. Currently, those any build in that area would have been earmarked to go to Mill Valley, but since we're seeing those buildings, sorry, getting a little feedback, be a little more full, and Naven does have space, and now that we have the Cooks Point crossing, it makes sense to go ahead and shift those students over to Naven. The important thing to know is that it doesn't impact any students now because no one lives there. So it's not a shift, kind of like redistricting. Understand that actually next school year would begin our redistricting process if there were a need to do that. So with implementation the following year. So we're still a little ways out. And quite honestly, Jonathan and I were talking today, there might not need to be redistricting because we're getting at the point where there's very little flexibility on where people will go, but we'll continue to monitor that. There were several trips highlighted on there. One that I was asked about specifically was the spring break trip to Costa Rica. The advisor for that is Madison Yoakum. I was asked that question earlier. You also have interns. We have impracticality for transportation on my section as well.
I had just one question. I think I know the answer to it, but I'm not sure. On the religious education thing, it said, if I can remember this correctly, that students would be able to make up or not, let's see how the core subjects would not be affected. It could not be out of core subjects, but I'm wondering about all the electives. In that, and the ability to make up that credit because as a former teacher, I can tell you, you can't make up that time no matter what you do. And I think, I don't know if it has to be said that way or not by state law. But I guess I'd be more inclined to say, okay, lunch, study hall, those types of free times that might be available would be very useful.
What I can do is take that back to Jonathan for insights from the committee. My understanding is the way it's written is the minimum we need to be aligned with the revised code. Otherwise, it's a by-person decision. So let me double check that for you, but
Okay.
90% sure. Yeah, and I think the language is in there that it won't be retaught, that assignments could still be accepted, but the teacher won't be responsible for additional instruction as a result of the absence.
I was just commenting that the logistics based on grade level is going to be very different. You know, free time in high school versus free time in elementary school is different, and logistics of moving students off-site and back onto site within a timetable, it's going to be an undertaking.
Obviously, the district is not responsible for transportation. That would be something that the parents would own. And obviously, if those timeframes are not upheld, then we have attendance laws that we have to adhere to, and they would come into place. I agree it does create more complexity to our school day.
The resolution for the substitute teaching license, is this something that we have to accept per law?
We do, in order to be able to have anyone with less than a bachelor's degree fill the spot to go down to the high school diploma, yes.
I mean, is this supported by our staff and teachers? I'm hesitant with this one in particular. I think qualifications do matter when it comes to, providing education. Granted, it is substitute teaching, but is there, I guess, what's the district's vetting process? I see what's listed here, but how will we implement this from a district standpoint?
So currently, with the workforce hole that we have, if someone's interested, we get them in, we try to train them up. As it's better if they're here in the summer and have the ability to kind of onboard at the beginning of the year. But we do try to onboard throughout the year, depending on if it's a long-term situation. That's probably better than someone that's day-to-day, quite frankly. But right now, the crisis is so significant that if they meet the qualifications and pass the background checks, they're stepping into the classroom. I would agree, qualifications do matter. The issue really is that we have a significant workforce and education, a gap in education, and it's only going to get worse. There's, I think I've told you guys before, 7,000 projected retirements in the next couple of years, and only 3,000 students entering the entering colleges in Ohio in education, and the completion rate is a third. So this challenge is just really starting. You used to be a substitute for so many years, and then you got a spot as a teacher, probably back in the day when I started, or Bill and Dick. That's kind of how you got in. That's really not our workforce anymore. It is a significant challenge for us.
I just wanted to comment about, I noticed there's also 2 early graduates on there, so wanted to, I know that's something new that we're doing, that we're kind of required to do this year, but wanted to congratulate them. And really, I'm excited to see those trips on there too. I saw already planning for spring break 2024 for the symphonic choir to go to Germany and Austria. And then the Junior State of America, I'd never really heard of that, so I was looking that up a little bit. They're just all, again, great opportunities for our kids to get some real, real experiences out there. So any other questions of Diane?
Really a comment. In the policies, there are several that'll say that we're taking the OHSAA, the high school athletic eligibility qualifications out of our policies and replacing it with students have to meet OHSAA eligibility. And so I asked Jonathan the question, where is the eligibility information available for parents and for students? And it's very readily available. It's in the materials for registration for classes, setting schedules and all those kinds of things. Our athletic department emphasizes that at parent-student meetings. Our guidance counselors are well-versed in what the requirements are, and so as they're working with students on their schedules and so forth, they're making sure that the kids have enough classes for eligibility for participation in athletics. So.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I have an additional question about the substitution resolution. Are the substitute teachers that do not have a post-secondary degree paid the same as other substitute teachers?
They're actually hired through our ESC, and they do have the same rate of pay.
Okay. Do we anticipate how this could impact morale? I'm just trying to make sure
I think it's more of a challenge for our staff when we don't have a coverage and they are stretched to cover for other teachers. So it's actually a bonus in the eyes of our teachers to have more people on the substitute list to pull from, because it's been challenging and people are giving up lunch times and planning periods in order to cover for absences across the building. It is a significant problem. It was a problem pre-COVID, and it continues to be a problem. It's more so a problem now.
Understood. When a state had National Guardsmen, acting as a substitute, or the military veteran program, I've seen a lot of negative feedback in general about those programs. So that's why I'm asking these questions. How we have these conversations, and I don't want to pass something that will negatively impact morale or quality. And so those are my concerns there. But I will take the recommendation and vote in favor of it. So thank you.
Yes, I think with the sub situation, that feeling is a little bit different. I've heard some of the same pushback, specifically around the veteran changes that may be on the horizon. I'm not sure I agree or disagree, but I've heard some of that same criticism. I think in the capacity of a substitute teacher, that's not a permanent spot. Maybe the outlook might be a little bit different.
Thank you. No other comments or questions? Then a roll call, please.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Kay?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. Mr. Smith, we'll start with you tonight. Comments and questions?
Yeah, I want to thank Todd for all the work he did on the 5-year forecast. It was a very good and detailed presentation, and I appreciate that very much. Want to wish Donna well in her retirement. Thanks to Naven for the presentation this evening. It was two other things. One, it was nice to have 6 National Merit Scholars recognized. It's an accomplishment that can change a lifetime. Congratulations to the 6 young men that were able to do that. Last thing is this building is a little quiet today because of the Bunsold Washington, D.C. trip. My grandson is on that trip, and I know that he's having a marvelous time because we have received 0 pictures, no text messages, not one single comment from him. And when he returns, I know I'll go up and say, "Hey, did you have a great time on this trip?" And he's going to say, "Yes."
He doesn't take after his grandpa, huh? Sorry. Mr. Keck.
Try to keep this short. The one thing it floors me every time I go into the elementaries at how much work is being done in the elementaries and how much energy the teachers have and the heart that they put into that. And I'm not saying the high school and STEM school don't do that. I was there, I saw that too, but it just truly amazes me. And I think this community is extremely lucky to have that kind of education. And I heard tonight, the education that our kids are getting right now is not the education we got. And I really feel, as I left the building, Naven was the last one, but there was no lack of this. Is just an overwhelming feeling of, could I go back and do it again? Because I didn't see that. And so our kids are very, very lucky to be there. So can't say enough about that. Also, last year I saw a few weak spots, but we were coming out of COVID, and those proved 110%, and I really appreciate having seen that, and I won't go into those details there. The Red Ribbon campaign, I didn't know much about it. I read your emails, and as a high school teacher and talking to parents, you can't talk enough to students and your students particularly about the dangers of drugs. I just can't say if we can somehow keep kids from ever trying anything in the drug-related department. There's this feeling, well, they're only doing the light drugs. Well, I doubt that. And if we can keep them from trying them, then we've won a battle. And I can't say enough about that. Watch too many kids go down the tube. So,
Thank you. Ms. Savage?
We had a great time on the tours. We spent a lot of time talking with the principals this time, kind of getting a kind of where is the temperature in the building. And it seems like in each building, there is a definite plan to elevate staff wellness as well as student wellness. And I heard tons of good things in the elementary schools and through Creekview about the DOGS program. And I think one of the keys to a successful district is getting our parents back in the building, especially to see what's going on. And the dogs that we were able to talk to when they're doing their tours, they are super excited about being there, and they're going home exhausted. The one gentleman said, "I put 1,200 steps on my iWatch today. I'm going home and putting my feet up. I can't believe teachers do this every day." So it's kind of interesting. Congratulations to the National Merit finalists. I think that's awesome. Naven, thank you to Naven for their presentations. And again, I'm constantly amazed, but we have another 3 pages of volunteers again this month. So by the time we get to the end of the year, there must be at least 12 or 15 pages of volunteers in our district. And that speaks so highly to the opportunities that all our students are getting.
Thank you. Jermaine?
Yes, I want to thank everyone for their support of the National Red Ribbon Month, and specifically I want to thank Mr. Holdren for kind of organizing the activities within the district to make, one thing I didn't want to do is pass a resolution it wasn't actually being implemented in the grassroots and up. So Mr. Holdren kind of really took that initiative, and I know both of my students, their buildings are doing different weeks. It's Edgewood's this week, and I think today was pajama day for the first graders, so they're kind of excited about that. And my kindergartner is next week. So look forward to having, please, if you're a parent, have those conversations about drug prevention. The age was 12 years old is when most people, according to the OES survey, when most students attempt or try something for the first time, and vaping is very significant in that demographic. And so please make sure we have those conversations and always encourage those healthy lifestyles. With the building visits, I was not able to attend due to my work obligations, but please don't take that as me not knowing the importance of getting in the buildings and knowing the context and seeing firsthand. I want to, and I look forward to the next cycle of building visits. So thank you.
Thank you. Todd, any comments?
Nothing to add.
Okay, Diane? Nope, okay. Then I'm just going to ditto what everybody else has said about Davin's presentation, how much we appreciate that. Also, thanking Eric Phillips for coming in to share that information with us and answer any questions that we had. Congratulations to the students. One other thing I wanted to bring up is I'd forgotten to say it earlier. Back at our homecoming game, there were some flyers put on cars. And I know we did receive one email from somebody out of our district who was upset about the flyers, and just kind of wanted to remind people that we do have a process. We do have a policy and a process for disseminating information either in school buildings or on our property, and the process was not followed for this. They did not have our approval to put that flyer on the car. So, if there is some information you want to share, please contact our board office and make sure that you follow our guidelines before sharing any of that information. For the building notes, that we got a little bit late this month, I really did love that focus on career discussions at the elementaries. I pretty much saw that, I think, at every single elementary building. They're doing it in different ways. I love the fact that Edgewood Building has a building song now, and they sung that. And just the habits of mind that they're using to work on how do you get through challenging times with the growth mindset. And also, we did see in Bill and my visits to Edgewood that students from the early college high school are helping tutoring in reading. I think they have 15 students, and those students, fingers crossed, are potentially interested in going into education. So we need to fast track them. But, and then I also wanted to point out that there was Impact 60 hosted Alec Simon, and he performed at Bunsold and I think both at the high schools. The high schools were together, and then he also performed at the Avalon Theater, and just an amazing, amazing message for our students, for our community. So thank you to Impact 60 for hosting that program and making sure he got in front of a bunch of kids. So appreciate that. And with that, I would accept a motion to adjourn our meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Savage.
Second.
Second by Mr. Keck. Roll call.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Keck? Yes. Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes, motion carries. We are adjourned at 8:40. Thank you.